difficult to decide what to make of Dragon's Dogma at first blush. The look of its fantasy is unrepentantly conventional, and the online features that it's built upon are not exactly intuitive to grasp until you experience them. And then there's the daring action game that rests at its core. Does this open-world RPG cohere into something memorable, or is it just overreaching? You are the Arisen, an otherwise regular human who's chosen and marked by the Great Dragon in order to fulfill some grand destiny. It's an honor that's bestowed upon a single individual per generation, punctuated by a gruesome draconic heart transplant. What it all means is kept dark till the very end. Frankly, Dragon's Dogma doesn't concern itself much with telling a grand story. In spite of the epic that you can sometimes discern unfolding along the margins, it's very easy, as is often the case in these sorts of games, to get caught up in the open-world craziness for hours at a time, and lose track of the story altogether.
It is odd his message was not writ in the report. An oversight brought on by haste, no doubt.
That said, all the incidental world building you'll encounter along your way, particularly the chatter of the pawn characters that make up your party, serves as a constant, effective reminder you're journeying through a place that's fully gilded and considered. The work just doesn't come through in the conventional narrative. This makes all the momentous story turns fall somewhat flat.
As long as that damnable beast draws breath, I'll fain accept any help on offer.
You'll save characters you don't care about from the precipice of doom, and vanquish villains who you're only passingly familiar with. It's generally a good thing when games allow their stories to unfold in the moment, so to speak. In the case of Dragon's Dogma, though, it just comes off as half-formed.
I fear I put on a shameful display.
The open world in Dragon's Dogma is teeming and deadly. The map is vast, and it's made all the more imposing due to the hard limit on fast travel. The items that enable you to warp around are expensive to stockpile, and apart from the somewhat central capital city, you can only designate one other spot to teleport to. In short, unlike in other games like it, you actually have to contend with the hazards that populate the monster-ridden nation of Grancis. Inevitably, you're going to get attacked not long after you exit one of the few bastions of civilization on the map, and it's even worse if you venture out at night. The enemies don't scale to your level either, so if you're overly bold in your treks, you should prepare for some one-sided fights. Places to rest or recover from your wounds are few and far between, so poorly planned excursions can easily put a drain on your resources. This lends Dragon's Dogma a sense of adventure and discovery that's rare in games these days. There's plenty of treasure scattered around, plus natural resources to exploit, as well as a whole lot of marginally useful junk, but chancing the risk of cresting the hill on the horizon in order to get it all becomes an actual real decision to ponder. By the same token, the escort quest, which is among the most shop-worn of RPG tropes, gets a new lease on life when the country you're traveling through could house ferocious goblin packs, high-level bandits, or worse. What's missing, however, is randomness. After a few trips through a locale, you'll start to become familiar with where the enemies live, and what was once a nasty surprise soon turns into routine slaughter when you're a high enough level. You're going to become very familiar with all the bandit and goblin haunts around Grand Soren. Bringing some knowledgeable companions with you can help mitigate some of this danger. The computer-controlled characters that make up your party, called pawns, glean information from their travels and adventures, and they sure do get around. Everyone who plays Dragon's Dogma gets to design their own pawn using the same exhaustive customization tool used for their main character, leveling and gearing them up alongside them, and uploading their current state to the game's servers at every rest stop. When you visit a rift stone in order to populate your party of 4, you can search for the specific sort of spawn you're after, right down to their class and the abilities they're packing. You can also add pawns to a favorites list, should you develop a particular fancy for one.
How did I perform? I tried my hardest.
As mentioned, pawns learn about creatures, locations, and tactics whenever they're enlisted by another player, so don't be surprised if your companion starts barking out tips in the midst of a fight, or cluing you in as to the lay of an unvisited locale. Players can also send you gifts after recruiting your pawn, and if your experience is anything like ours, be prepared to be showered with rotten produce and rank seafood. Better keep those airtight flasks handy. Dragon's Dogma is an expansive game possessed of many intricate systems, so it's not surprising that it feels a little overwhelming at times. The mechanisms that govern the quest system are often befuddling, with location markers that seem to appear and vanish willy-nilly, making some of the most mundane tasks inordinately time-consuming. You'll also spend a good deal of time in menus, managing your pawn's encumbrance, making the innumerable crafting components you come across, and fiddling with skills and items. Granted, these are all symptoms of a deep game. We just wish they were more elegantly handled.
I've little trouble keeping an inventory, but contentment leads to failure.
Dragon's Dogma puts its gameplay front and center, which is quite unusual for an open-world RPG. The combat is fast and full of feeling, with depth, impact, and a whole lot of spectacle. If you're expecting something buttoned up and deliberate, you're going to be quite surprised. Depending on what class you inhabit at the moment, you're going to be charging into melee, sword extended, firing volleys of arrows at a rate of 5 a second, or chucking actual meteors at your enemies. At higher levels, the fights really become bananas. In the style of the Final Fantasy job system, you can change your class pretty much at will, picking and choosing from compatible abilities you've unlocked in other vocations, and tweaking your traits from a grand array of passive abilities. You earn discipline points alongside experience for defeating enemies, which allows you to purchase skills, and you can trick out your pawn in much the same way, though they're limited to only 6 of the 9 classes.
I've learned a new way to fight their ilk.
Being successful at combat, especially when it comes to your first encounter with specific enemy types, requires prescience and boldness. Monsters have hard-coded weaknesses and well-realized tactical behaviors. Exploiting these means paying careful attention to their patterns, listening for the cues of canny pawns, and having the guts to seize tactical opportunities when they arise. If you're playing a melee class, this often involves scaling the back of a gargantuan monster and hammering on one of its weak points. Elsewhere, it calls for carefully aimed spells, the most powerful of which can take a long time to cast, or patiently conserving your stamina to fire off a volley at the right moment.
I'll be damned! This your handiwork? For truth?
Combat is eminently satisfying, not only due to how much variety you have in your approach depending on your class, but also because of how effortlessly cinematic it all looks. Granted, there are moments when the game looks goofy due to you clipping through a mythic beast's nether regions in an attempt to scale it, but taken as a whole, there are few games with combat so engrossing and rewarding as what you'll encounter here. Dragon's Dogma makes a distinctive first impression with a hair metal intro, but rest assured that the rest of the presentation is subdued in comparison. The gorgeous vistas and striking evocative combat animations serve as an effective counterbalance to the character models that can look somewhat turgid and odd when viewed up close. The voice acting is generally well done, good enough to help make the repetitive pawn chatter that much less grating during your 40+ hours trek.
I'll service mate!
However, some laggy menu performance and random stops and starts will likely irritate you.
Knowing that, are you prepared to see His grace now?
If you're the kind of player who can get completely lost in these sorts of open-world RPGs, you're going to eat Dragon's Dogma alive. However much its reach exceeds its grasp in certain respects, this ambitious game succeeds in taking the form in an altogether welcome direction, one that does not sacrifice minute-to-minute gameplay on the altar of expansiveness. If you have a few dozen hours to spare, we could think of much worse ways to spend them.
You shall have an honored place among them, Arisen.